What's up everyone, it's Kelly and today I've got another dupe video for you. So if you missed it, I recently did a video where I was trying to find a dupe in my collection of Mooncat House of Hades, and in the comments of that video a bunch of you requested that I also try to find a dupe for Holo Taco Full Charge, which honestly is one of my favorite Holo Taco shades, but sadly it has been discontinued and it's no longer available. So I thought it would be fun to continue the series and search my collection for a polish similar to Holo Taco Full Charge. So I searched my collection of over 3,000 polishes and I have 10 potential dupes. And to be honest, this was kind of a tricky color to find a duplicate for, just because green is one of the most underutilized colors in nail polish. And honestly, not that many brands are making green nail polish, but I did actually find some really good potential dupes for you. We'll go over Full Charge in detail before I get into the potential dupes, but I was specifically trying to focus on linear hollow green polishes. Although I do actually have a couple of scattered hollows in there as well that I thought were very similar in color. So we may as well just dive in. I'll show you Full Charge and then I'll show you the potential dupes, and then we can discuss what I think is the closest to actually duplicating Holo Taco Full Charge. So roll the swatches. Okay, so let's start off with the polish itself. This is Holo Taco Full Charge and this one is described as a lime green linear hollow. So you can see it definitely has a strong yellowy undertone to that base color, and of course it does have the linear hollow finish, so you can see sort of lines of rainbow pigment coming through on the nail. I find it to be especially prominent in sunlight. I am showing you what this polish looks like indoors with direct lighting, but I do find that you can see the hollow most prominently where the camera is slightly out of focus, so really around my cuticle areas where you can see it. So let's try to find a dupe of this polish. Now, before we get into other brands, I really quickly wanted to do a comparison of another Holo Taco polish. So this one is Green Taffy, and this is actually another green linear hollow in their collection. But as you can see, this is not similar at all. I was just curious to see if there was any sort of similarities that I could see between the two, but aside from the fact that they are both green and they are both hollow, I think they're very different. Green Taffy is a lot deeper, a lot darker, and it does have a very blue undertone. So just for reference, figured I would try it, but this one is definitely not a dupe. So one of the first polishes that came to mind for me was A. England Golden Dome, and this one is a chartreuse green shimmer that does have a linear hollow pigment running throughout. Now this one is interesting. I think it's definitely a lot more yellowy of a color, and it does have a really interesting shimmer running throughout, but one thing about this one is the hollow is not quite as prominent. I think that's something that I see a lot with A. England polishes, where their hollow is almost a little bit pastel, if that makes sense. So the rainbow is a little bit more muted, but overall I would say that this one is not a dupe because the type of hollow is different and the color is just a little bit too yellowy. Now my next choice was from Ice Cream Nails. They actually have a lot of green linear hollows, so I'm going to show you a few. The closest of which that I thought initially would be Keep Off the Grass, which this one I would also describe as a lime green linear hollow, and you can see in the side by side they're actually pretty decently similar. Ice Cream Nails is one of the most holographic brands that I use, and I think you can really see that linear hollow pigment showing through, especially around the cuticle area. But I do think that these polishes differ slightly in that Keep Off the Grass is a darker color, and I do think that it's a little bit more saturated, so it has a little bit less of that grayish whitish kind of tone in it. It might be very slightly more yellow toned, but overall I still think that the darkness is what makes this color not quite a dupe, but very, very close. Next up, I decided to try another Ice Cream Nails. This one is High on Hollow, and you can see in the bottle this one's definitely not going to be an exact dupe, but I figured because it was a little bit lighter of a color and it doesn't have as much of that yellowy undertone, I thought it would work pretty well. This one I would actually describe as an almost neon linear hollow, but looking at them side by side, you can see that High on Hollow is definitely more of a blue undertone, and I think that this one is actually just a little bit too light. And one thing to note about High on Hollow is because it's that kind of neon formula, the holographic pigment is a little bit harder to see within it, so it doesn't quite look like Full Charge. Then we've got yet another Ice Cream Nails. This one is I Want It All, and this one is a deeper green linear hollow. I would almost describe this one as being like an apple green or maybe like a leafy green kind of color. And I do think that in the bottle, this one looks like a darker shade, but on the nail, I actually thought it was decently similar to Full Charge. Looking at them side by side, I can see a lot of similarities, but I Want It All does appear to have a little bit more of that bluish undertone, but I still think that it is pretty similar. So I do see a lot of similar features within the two. I just think it's different sort of undertones, but I Want It All is that sort of brighter green kind of color. So again, kind of close. And one last ice cream nails. This one is Do You Party? And this is actually part of their plus range. Now, this is another one that I really didn't think was going to be a dupe, but I figured I would compare the two of them anyway, just to see how close I could get. And this one, as you can see, this is a very blue leaning green holo. So it actually almost leans into teal kind of territory. And especially next to Full Charge, you can see that they are just very different colors. Full Charge almost looks very yellow next to it, whereas Do You Party starts to get into that blue territory. So even though it is another very holographic one, it is definitely not a dupe. And funny enough, that's not even all of the ice cream nails green holos I have, but those are the closest ones I've got. So that's it for ice cream nails. Next up, I thought I would try a holo from Color Club. I have this shade Kismet, and this one, honestly, looking at it after seeing all of the greens that I've shown you so far, this one definitely looks like a silver into almost like a yellowy color, but on its own, I would actually consider this one to be like a lemon lime kind of shade. It's a little bit between being a green and being a yellow, but as you can see side by side with Full Charge, it's definitely not there. I think that Color Club in general has really beautiful, very holographic colors, but they are on the silvery side, so they do tend to look a little bit less saturated than other brands. So this one, honestly, next to Full Charge, kind of looks like a warm silver or maybe even a champagne color. Next up, I thought I would try doing a few polishes that are actually not linear holo, but they are scattered holo. So instead of getting those lines of rainbow pigment, you're kind of just getting a scattering of little rainbow flecks everywhere. So I started off with ILNP Staycation because I think that this base color is extremely similar to Full Charge. It definitely has that sort of yellowy green tone to it, but as you can see side by side, that scattered holo does make it look so different. So it actually does lighten the color a lot, and it doesn't quite give the same effect. So I think the colors are pretty similar, but the formula was just a little bit different because we're looking at a scattered holo. Next, I tried Picture Polish Selena, and this one I thought would be really interesting because it's kind of hard to classify Picture Polish holos, because this one I would call a scattered holo, but sometimes these scattered holos from Picture Polish tend to look a little bit linear. It's almost like they have both in there, where they have some linear holo pigment, but then bigger scattered bits throughout. So looking at these side by side, I actually was pretty impressed with the color match, but I do think that that linear holo is just a lot stronger in Full Charge, whereas in Selena, you can see a lot more of that sort of scattered holo, and it almost looks a little bit golden in a lot of lightings. Now, this next one I knew wasn't going to be a dupe, but I was just curious to see them side by side just in case. But I recently got this polish, Be Pre-Peared, from Painted Polish, and I would say that the color of this is a very similar shade to Full Charge, but this one is a different formula. This one I would also call a scattered holo, but this is also a reflective polish, so it has that sort of cartoonish glow to it, and the holo pigment in here is a little bit larger, so it almost kind of looks like scattered stars throughout. Now, in terms of color, I will say they're similar, but again, just having that linear holo changes the way that Full Charge looks a little bit, and because that linear holo almost pulled a blue color in that part of the rainbow, I feel like it made Be Prepared look a lot more yellow toned. Now, that was all the polishes that I thought were very similar, but I did actually decide to try a little combination, which is something that I have not done in my dupe videos before, but I really thought if I combined Ice Cream Nails Keep Off the Grass and High on Holo, it would give me the same coloring as Full Charge, because I think Keep Off the Grass is very similar. It just needed to be very slightly brighter and maybe slightly more blue toned. And I have to say, looking at them side by side, I do think this is a very close dupe. However, High on Holo does have less holo pigment, so I do feel like you get less of that rainbow shine. But I do think in sunlight, these polishes would probably look like a dupe next to Full Charge. And I think maybe if I swatched swapped Keep Off the Grass and High on Holo, it might give me a more holographic look while still keeping that same exact color. So those are all the polishes in my collection that I thought had the potential to duplicate Holo Taco. Real quick, let's look at a comparison chart of all the colors. Now, obviously, some of them are not the right color, but the correct formula. Some of them are the correct color, but the wrong formula. But I will say, I do think we found a couple of really great options here. I would say Ice Cream Nails Keep Off the Grass is the closest thing I have to a duplicate on its own. I think the color is extremely similar. It has that linear holographic pigment in it, and it is very holographic. The only difference I would say is that the Ice Cream Nails one is a little bit deeper and possibly very slightly more yellow toned. However, when I did do a layer of Ice Cream Nails High on Holo over it, I found that to be actually a perfect color match. The only difference is because High on Holo is a neon polish, it does have a little bit less of that holographic pigment, so it didn't show through quite as much holo as the Holo Taco polish. When it comes to nail polish, honestly, every brand does even the same exact color very slightly differently, so it's hard to find an exact duplicate of any given polish, especially one that's a specialty finish. But I think the options here are actually a little bit closer than in my last comparison duplicate video, so I thought that was really interesting. And I honestly had a lot of fun going through my collection and seeing just how few green holos there are in the world. I always say it, I feel like there aren't enough greens in the world. I do think that brands have been taking on that challenge a little bit more, and we have been seeing a lot more amazing greens, but definitely not as many in this linear holo formula. So it was definitely really interesting to go through and see all of these. As usual, I will have all of the polishes that I shared today linked in the description down below so you can check them out if you're interested in any of them. Now, if you have a request for another polish that you'd like to see me do a dupe video for, definitely leave it in the comments. And if you have a polish that you would say is a duplicate of Holo Taco Full Charge, I would also love to hear that, so leave that in the comments as well. And if you enjoyed this video and you want to see more of this style, please hit that like button. It really helps me out. It lets me know I'm doing a good job. And if you're not already subscribed to my channel, I would really appreciate if you could subscribe. And of course, a huge thank you to my supporters on Patreon, my Royal Astronomer Amanda M, as well as my Cosmic Admirals Ken, Rosie, and Angel. I really appreciate your support, and I'll see you all in my next video. Bye. Today's fun fact question comes from Patreon supporter Delane, and Delane wants to know, would you want to be taller or shorter than you now are? It's usually hard to tell online, but just for reference, if you don't know what I look like in real life, I'm actually 5'7", which is slightly taller than average. For some reason, online, a lot of people think that I am on the short side, but I'm actually pretty much on the tall side. But it's funny because I would say in real life, people also tend to mistake me for being shorter until they're standing next to me, so I guess I give off short person energy, but I am actually fairly tall. Now, would I want to be taller or shorter? Honestly, I am satisfied with my current height, but I think if I had to choose, I would probably choose to be taller, just because I feel like there are a lot of benefits to being tall. Obviously, there's like a lot of things that aren't great about being tall, like you kind of feel more crammed into small spaces, but honestly, I don't really find myself in small spaces very often, and I feel like one of the greater inconveniences to me at my current height is being able to reach things that are very high up. So if I was taller, I would be able to reach them, which would be nicer. And also I feel like if I was taller, I could probably eat a lot more. So that would be fun. I love eating. So yeah, if you want to leave your answer, leave it down below, but also let us know what your current height is, and then if you would choose to be taller or shorter. And that is it, and I'll see you all in my next video. Bye. Thank you.